They targeted the lonely cabin, but 4 Rottweilers turned the hunter into the prey. The glass cracked at 11:47 p.m. and nobody heard it. Not the $14,000 Bowers & Wilkins speakers embedded in the living room walls. Not the 62 microphones threaded through the ceiling grid like nerve endings. Not the AI system called Aegis, which monitored every frequency between 20 Hz and 20 kHz across 11,000 square feet of reinforced glass, brushed steel, and polished concrete. Nobody heard it because the crack wasn't in the house. It was in the code. I need to tell you something before we go any further. I've told this story 3 times now. Twice to journalists, once to a federal investigator. And every time I get to this part, I change a detail. Not on purpose. It's just that the human brain doesn't record trauma the way a camera does. It records feelings, impressions, the smell of something burning that might have been wiring or might have been fear. So if the timeline slips by a minute or two, forgive me. The important parts are right. The parts that keep me up at night, those I remember perfectly. 14 miles south, in the parking lot of a shuttered Ace Hardware off Route 9 in Garrison, New York, a man named Declan Reese sat in the back of a matte black Sprinter van and watched a cursor blink on a laptop screen. The screen cast a blue glow on his face, thin, angular, the kind of face that looked like someone had started carving it and quit halfway through. His fingers hadn't touched the keyboard in 40 seconds. He was waiting. The cursor blinked. Then 3 words appeared. Handshake complete. Declan exhaled through his nose, closed his eyes, opened them. We're in. Behind him, 2 men checked their gear. Mace, real name Marcus Embry, 6'2", 240, ex-private military from a contractor nobody would admit existed, pulled back the charging handle on a suppressed SIG MCX and let it snap forward. The sound was small and final, like a period at the end of a sentence you can't take back. Beside him, Tomas did the same with a Glock 19, his hands moving with the bored efficiency of someone who'd done this enough times to stop counting. Declan turned in his chair. Timeline hasn't changed. Aegis goes dark in 6 minutes. Cameras, motion sensors, electromagnetic locks, pressure plates, thermals, all of it. The house goes blind, deaf, and dumb. We walk in through the west corridor. Auxiliary server room is in the basement. The drive we need is in a floor safe behind the secondary workstation. Biometric lock, but with Aegis down, it defaults to a mechanical bypass. 12-digit code. I have it. Mace didn't look up from his weapon. And the owner? Elias Vance, 53. Architect. Lives alone. Armed. He's a billionaire who designs buildings. Not a gun guy. Tomas spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. Dogs. Declan paused. 4 Rottweilers. They have the run of the property. No collars. No leashes. No crates. Mace looked up now. That's a problem. It's not. When Aegis goes down, the automated feeding system triggers. Emergency protocol dumps kibble into the outdoor stations on the North Terrace. The dogs follow the food. We enter from the west. They'll be 300 feet away and eating. Mace stared at him for a long beat. Then he went back to his weapon. Tomas said nothing, but something shifted behind his eyes. The kind of doubt that lives in the space between what you're told and what you believe. I wish someone had listened to that doubt. Would have saved everyone a lot of blood. Declan turned back to his screen. 5 minutes and 41 seconds. The house sat on a ridge above the Hudson Valley like something that had fallen from the future and embedded itself in the rock. 12,000 square feet of floor-to-ceiling glass walls, cantilevered steel beams, and poured concrete that Elias Vance had designed himself. Every angle, every joint, every sight line calculated to make the forest outside feel like part of the interior. It had been featured in Architectural Digest twice. Dwell once. The New York Times called it a cathedral of controlled light. The insurance company called it a nightmare. They were both right. Elias sat in his studio on the 2nd floor, bare feet on heated concrete, a pencil behind his ear, and a half-finished bourbon on the drafting table. The glass had left a ring of condensation on the wood, a faint circle he'd wipe off later and forget about. He was working on a commission, a performing arts center in Reykjavik, and the cantilever ratios were giving him trouble. The pencil moved, stopped, moved again. He erased a line and redrew it 2 millimeters to the left. The eraser shavings collected in a small pile near his elbow. The graphite smudge on his index finger was so familiar it might as well have been a tattoo. He didn't hear the dogs. That was normal. The four Rottweilers moved through the house like they were part of its architecture, silent, deliberate, each one occupying a position that seemed random but wasn't. Elias had never trained them to patrol. They'd figured it out themselves, the way water figures out how to flow downhill. Zeus was lying in the main corridor on the ground floor, his massive head resting on his front paws, his eyes half closed but tracking. He was 9 years old and weighed 138 pounds. His coat was the deep black and mahogany that breeders called classic, but there was nothing classic about the way he carried himself. He moved like a bouncer at a club that didn't need a velvet rope, the kind where one look was enough. He'd come from a working line in Bavaria, same breeder that supplied dogs to the Bundespolizei. Elias had flown there personally, sat in a muddy training yard outside Augsburg, rain coming down sideways, the smell of wet straw and dog hair so thick you could taste it, and watched 6 puppies run a confidence test. 5 of them barked, jumped, and showed off. Zeus walked to the center of the yard, sat down, and looked at Elias like he'd been waiting for him. That was 7 years ago. Zeus hadn't barked since. No, wait, that's not true. He barked once, 2 years back, when a FedEx driver left a package too close to the front door and the wind knocked it against the glass. 1 bark, deep enough to rattle the windows. Then nothing. The FedEx guy never came back. Started leaving packages at the end of the driveway. Hera was in the kitchen, 2 years younger than Zeus, lighter by 20 pounds, and smarter than both of them put together, if smart meant the ability to read a situation 3 moves ahead. She had a habit of positioning herself near doorways, always angled so she could see 2 rooms at once. Elias's architect brain appreciated the geometry. His gut appreciated the fact that nothing moved through the ground floor without Hera knowing about it. Ares was on the back terrace, the biggest of the 4, 142 pounds of chest and jaw and attitude. He was 5, and he still hadn't figured out that the sliding glass door was closed when it was clean. He'd walked into it twice last month, left a nose print on the glass both times, 2 greasy ovals at exactly 31 inches off the ground that the cleaning service could never quite get off. But what he lacked in spatial awareness, he made up for in sheer physical presence. When Ares stood up, the room got smaller. Athena was nowhere. That was her thing. The youngest at 3, she was the one visitors never saw. She'd appear behind you, beside you, in whatever room you'd just left. She didn't patrol. She haunted. Here's the thing about Athena that I didn't understand until later. She was the only one of the 4 who'd been surrendered. The breeder in Augsburg didn't produce her. A family in Yonkers did, bought her as a puppy, realized a Rottweiler in a 2-bedroom apartment was a bad idea, and dropped her at a shelter in Westchester when she was 14 months old. Elias found her through a rescue network. When he picked her up, she didn't wag her tail, didn't lick his hand, just looked at him with those amber eyes and waited to see if this one would keep her. He did, but something from those 14 months stayed with her. A stillness that wasn't calm. It was vigilance. The quiet of an animal that learned early that the world takes things away, and the only defense is to watch everything, trust nothing, and never let anyone see you coming. Elias had once joked that if the other 3 were the security system, Athena was the last line of defense nobody knew existed. He wasn't joking. The bourbon was getting warm. Elias picked it up, took a sip, and set it back down. The Reykjavik cantilever still looked wrong. He erased the line again. Outside, the Hudson Valley was dark. No moon. Clouds sitting low on the ridgeline like a lid on a pot. The only light came from the house itself, warm, amber, leaking through the glass walls into the trees. Zeus lifted his head. One ear rotated, then the other. He stared at the west wall for 6 seconds. Then he put his head back down, but his eyes stayed open. The lights died at 11:53 p.m. Not a flicker, not a surge. Every light in the house went out at once, like someone had reached into the electrical panel and pulled every breaker simultaneously. The heated floors went cold. The speakers went silent. The 62 microphones stopped listening. The cameras, 31 of them covering every angle, every hallway, every window, blinked off and stayed dark. The temperature dropped fast. You don't realize how much heat a smart house pumps until it stops. Within 90 seconds, Elias could feel the October night pushing through the glass. Not cold exactly, but the absence of warmth, which is worse. It's the difference between jumping into a pool and having the water rise around you. One you choose, the other just happens. The house smelled different in the dark. Without the climate system circulating air through its charcoal filters, The raw scent of the building came through. Concrete dust, steel, the faint chemical tang of the sealant on the glass panels, and underneath all of it, dog. Not unpleasant, just animal. The smell of 4 large bodies that lived and breathed and shed and drooled in a space designed for humans. Aegis didn't crash. It was murdered. Declan's code had spent 11 days crawling through the system's architecture, mapping vulnerabilities, testing firewalls, and waiting for a specific window. The 0.3-second gap between Aegis's nightly diagnostic cycle and its security refresh. In that gap, the code injected a root-level override that told every connected device in the house to shut down and stay down. No alarm, no notification, no failsafe. The $4.2 million security system that protected Elias Vance's home, his work, and his life went from operational to dead in less time than it takes to blink. In the van, Declan smiled, not wide, just a small curl at the corner of his mouth. The satisfaction of a man who'd spent 3 months solving a puzzle and had just watched the last piece fall into place. Aegis is down. Feeding protocol triggered. Dogs should be moving to the North Terrace now. Mace pulled on a balaclava. The fabric smelled like the plastic bag it had been sealed in. New, sterile, the smell of premeditation. Tomas did the same. Go time. They moved fast. Out of the van. Across the gravel road. Through 200 yards of forest on a path Declan had mapped using satellite imagery and a drone he'd flown 3 weeks earlier. The trees were dense, oak, maple, birch, and the ground was soft with decomposing leaves that swallowed their footsteps. Wet leaves, the kind that stick to your boots and smell like earth rotting back into itself. Mace led. Tomas followed. Declan stayed 50 yards back, laptop in a tactical bag, monitoring the kill on a tablet strapped to his forearm. The tablet's glow lit his face from below, turning his features into a Halloween mask. He didn't notice. He was reading data the way a surgeon reads vitals. The house appeared through the trees like a lantern. Even without power, the glass walls caught ambient light, starlight, the faint glow of the distant town, and threw it back in pale geometric patterns. Beautiful, exposed, defenseless. That's what they thought. Mace pressed his back against the west wall. The steel was cold through his jacket. October cold, Hudson Valley cold, the kind that finds the gaps in your clothing and settles into your joints. He tested the corridor door. The electromagnetic lock was dead. The door swung inward with a soft click. He keyed his earpiece. We're in. Declan's voice came back, flat and clinical. Proceed to basement. I'll monitor from here. Tomas stepped through the door behind Mace. They both wore night vision goggles. Gen 3, military surplus, and the world turned green and grainy. The corridor stretched ahead of them, polished concrete floor, steel-framed glass walls on both sides, a staircase at the far end leading down to the basement. Clean, quiet, empty. If you've ever walked through someone's home in the dark when they don't know you're there, you know the feeling. Everything looks wrong. The furniture is too still. The air is too thick. Your body knows, at some level below thought, below language, that you don't belong here. And that feeling gets louder with every step. Mace and Tomas didn't feel it. Or if they did, they'd trained themselves to ignore it. That was their second mistake. The first was the dogs. They reached the staircase. Mace glanced down. Nothing. He took the first step. Upstairs, Elias heard the silence. Not the absence of sound. Silence has its own frequency when you live in a smart house. The low hum of Aegis processing data, the whisper of climate control adjusting temperature in micro increments, the barely perceptible vibration of the floor heating coils. These sounds were so constant, so woven into the texture of daily life, that you stopped hearing them the way you stop hearing your own heartbeat, until it stops. Elias looked up from his drafting table. The pencil was still in his hand. The room was dark, completely dark, and the temperature was already dropping. He could feel it on his bare feet. The concrete was cooling. It felt like standing on a gravestone. Aegis. Nothing. Aegis. Status report. Silence. Not the silence of a system processing a command. The silence of a system that isn't there. His phone was on the drafting table. He picked it up. No Wi-Fi. No cellular. The house sat in a dead zone. The internal mesh network was his only connection to the outside world, and that network ran through Aegis. The screen felt cold in his hand. Useless. A $2,000 paperweight. The bourbon sat untouched. Elias set the pencil down. His breathing changed. Shallow. Controlled. The breathing of a man whose brain was already running calculations his body hadn't caught up to yet. He stood, moved to the window. The valley below was dark. The trees were dark. Everything was dark. Then he looked down at the ground floor, and he saw a green light, moving, small, precise. The unmistakable glow of a night vision device reflecting off glass. Elias's mouth went dry, the kind of dry that happens before your body even registers fear, like your saliva just evacuated, left the building, wanted no part of whatever was coming next. He stepped back from the window. His hands found the edge of the drafting table. He gripped it hard enough to whiten his knuckles. Someone was in his house. He had a panic room, a reinforced concrete box behind the studio, disguised as a storage closet, biometric lock, independent of Aegis, running on its own battery and processor. Inside, a satellite phone, a medical kit, 72 hours of water and food, and a direct line to a private security firm in Manhattan. Elias turned and moved toward it. Then he stopped, because Zeus was standing in the doorway. The dog's head was low. His weight was forward. His eyes caught the faint ambient light and reflected it back like two copper coins. His lips were closed. No teeth, no sound, but every hair along his spine was standing, and in the near-total darkness, that ridge of raised fur made him look bigger than he was, made him look like something from before dogs had names. He wasn't growling. That's how Elias knew it was bad. Zeus only went silent when the threat was real enough to stop talking about. Behind Zeus, in the hallway, Hera appeared, then Athena, materializing from the shadows like she'd been part of the wall. Athena pressed herself against the baseboard, her body flat, her head low, those amber eyes the only part of her that moved. She was shaking, not fear. I don't think Athena knew what fear was. It was the tremor of a coiled spring, the vibration of something holding itself back. The three dogs stood in a loose formation, blocking the hallway, facing the staircase that led down to the ground floor, where the green lights were. Elias looked at Zeus. The dog looked back, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with commands, hand signals, or training protocols. It was older than that, older than language, older than houses. Go, hide. We'll handle this. Elias moved to the panic room. His thumb found the biometric scanner. The lock clicked. He pulled the door open, stepped inside, and sealed it behind him. The satellite phone was in a charging cradle on the wall. He grabbed it, punched in the number for the security firm, and pressed it to his ear. Ringing. Ringing. Sentinel Security, state your emergency. This is Elias Vance. Account 774. My home has been breached. Armed intruders. Aegis is down. I'm in the safe room. Confirmed. Response team dispatched. ETA 38 minutes. 38 minutes. Elias closed his eyes, leaned his head back against the cold concrete. He could taste the bourbon still, faint and sour at the back of his throat. He could hear his own pulse in his ears. In 38 minutes, whatever was going to happen would already be over, and there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it except sit in a box and listen. Mace reached the bottom of the stairs and swept the basement. The night vision turned everything into a green-tinted aquarium. The server racks along the far wall, the secondary workstation with its 3 monitors, the brushed steel door of the floor safe. Clear. Tomas was still on the stairs, covering the corridor above. Clear up here. Mace crossed to the safe, knelt, found the mechanical bypass, a 12-digit rotary dial hidden behind a magnetic panel. He keyed his earpiece. Declan, code. The numbers came through one at a time. Mace dialed them. His fingers were cold. The gloves were tactical, thin, designed for trigger discipline, not warmth. Each click of the dial felt too loud in the dead house, like tapping on a coffin lid. The safe clicked. He pulled the door open. Inside, a black external drive, titanium case, no label. This was it. The architectural blueprints for a classified government facility that Elias Vance had designed under a defense contract so secret the contract itself was classified. Worth nothing on the open market. Worth $11 million to the people who'd hired Declan. Mace reached in and pulled it out. Got it. We're moving. He stood, turned toward the stairs, and the sound hit him like a wall. Low. So low it barely registered as sound. More like a pressure change, the way your ears pop before a storm. It came from everywhere and nowhere. From the walls, from the floor, From the darkness above the staircase where Tomas was supposed to be standing guard, a growl. I want you to stop for a second and imagine that sound. Not a dog barking in a neighbor's yard, not a German shepherd in a movie. A Rottweiler growl in total darkness, in a house made of glass and steel that amplifies every frequency when you're standing in a basement with one exit and no idea where the sound is coming from. It's not a warning. It's a vibration that your skeleton picks up before your ears do. It sits in your chest and squeezes. Mace froze. His finger moved to the trigger. The night vision scanned the staircase. Tomas was still there, still in position, but he wasn't looking down at Mace anymore. He was looking behind him, into the corridor. Mace. His voice was barely a whisper. We have a problem. The dogs. They didn't go for the food. Silence. 3 seconds that felt like 30. Then Mace heard it. Not one growl now. Multiple. Overlapping. Coming from different positions in the house. Left, right, and directly above. They were surrounded. Declan. Mace's voice was tight. Controlled. The feeding protocol didn't work. Static. Then, that's not possible. I triggered it manually. The outdoor stations should have. They didn't eat. They're here. All of them. And that right there. That's the moment the plan died. Declan had spent 3 months mapping a digital system. He knew every firewall, every protocol, every line of code. What he didn't know, what no amount of satellite imagery or drone footage could teach him, is that a working Rottweiler doesn't leave its post for kibble. Not when the house is wrong. Not when the air smells like strangers and gun oil and the cold sweat of men who shouldn't be there. Declan hacked the machine. He forgot about the animals. More static. Then Declan's voice, stripped of its clinical calm for the first time. Get out. West corridor. Now. Mace moved. Fast. Up the stairs, past Tomas, into the main corridor. The night vision painted the hallway in shades of green. Glass walls on both sides. The west door at the far end, 60 feet away. They'd made it 10 steps when the shape appeared. At the end of the corridor, between them and the door, a Rottweiler. Massive, 138 pounds of black and mahogany, standing dead center in the hallway, head low, eyes reflecting the infrared like 2 hot coals. Zeus. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just stood there, blocking the exit, his body perfectly still except for the slow rise and fall of his breathing. The night vision gave his eyes an alien quality. Bright green circles in a black face, unblinking, locked on. Mace raised his weapon. The laser sight found the dog's chest. Behind them, a sound. Nails on concrete. Mace spun. Another Rottweiler, smaller, lighter, standing at the opposite end of the corridor, blocking the retreat. Hera. They were boxed in. Shoot them. Mace's voice was flat, professional. A man solving a problem. Drop the big one first. Tomas raised the Glock. His hand was steady. He'd shot people before. In Medellin, in Beirut, in a warehouse in Rotterdam that still showed up in his dreams. But his finger hesitated on the trigger. There's supposed to be 4. Mace blinked, scanned the corridor. 2 dogs visible, 2 missing. Where was Ares? Where was Athena? A sound from the right. Both men turned. The glass wall, floor to ceiling, 1/4 inch tempered, showed nothing but darkness and the faint reflection of their own green-lit silhouettes. Then, from the left, a thud. Heavy. Something moving fast through an adjacent room. The dogs weren't just blocking exits. They were flanking. Mace made a decision. Through the big one. I'll put him down. You cover the rear. He raised the SIG, steadied the laser on Zeus's skull, and pulled the trigger. The suppressed round cracked through the silence. Not loud, but sharp, a sound that split the air like a whip. Zeus moved. Not away from the bullet. Into it. He lunged forward and to the left, the round passing through the space where his head had been a 1/4 second earlier, and punching into the glass wall behind him. The glass spiderwebbed, but held. And then Zeus was running. 95 feet of corridor. 138 pounds of Rottweiler covering it in under 4 seconds. His nails dug into the polished concrete, and the sound was like a deck of cards being shuffled fast. Chick, 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 chick. Getting louder, getting closer. Mace fired again. Missed. The dog was too fast, too low, hugging the ground like a guided missile. 3rd shot. This one hit. The bullet caught Zeus in the right shoulder. He stumbled. 1 stride. 2. But he didn't stop. The impact spun him slightly, and a spray of dark blood hit the concrete floor, but his legs kept driving forward. His eyes never changed. Never flinched. Whatever pain he felt, he filed it somewhere behind the thing that mattered more. He was 15 feet away. Mace tried to fire again. Zeus hit him in the chest. The impact was like getting tackled by a linebacker made of concrete. Mace's feet left the ground. His back slammed into the floor. The SIG skidded away across the polished concrete, spinning in circles, the laser painting a dizzy red line on the ceiling. And Zeus's jaws were at his throat, not biting, not yet, just there, pressing, 100 pounds of pressure per square inch, hovering one decision away from death. Mace couldn't breathe. The dog's weight pinned him. He could feel the heat of Zeus's breath on his neck, wet, metallic, the copper smell of the dog's own blood mixing with saliva. He could feel the vibration of the growl passing through his sternum and into his spine. Behind them, Tomas spun toward Zeus and Mace. His Glock came up. He had a clear shot, the dog's broad back, center mass, point-blank range. He pulled the trigger. Zeus heard it, or felt it, or some instinct bred into his bloodline over 2,000 years told him what was coming. He twisted sideways, releasing Mace, and the bullet meant for his spine punched into the concrete floor, sending up a spray of dust and chips. But the second bullet found him. It hit him in the rib cage, left side. The force knocked him off Mace and sent him sliding across the floor. He tried to stand. His front legs pushed. His back legs scrambled for purchase on the blood-slicked concrete. He couldn't get up. He tried again. His body shook with the effort. Blood pooled beneath him, dark and spreading, the edges creeping outward across the polished floor like a stain that couldn't be cleaned. He collapsed. His breathing was shallow, ragged. His eyes were still open, still locked on Mace, still burning with something that didn't have a name in any human language. The corridor was quiet for about 2 seconds. Then Hera screamed. Not a bark, not a howl. A sound that came from somewhere deeper than the throat. A raw, guttural shriek of recognition that echoed off the glass walls and the steel beams and filled the entire house with its frequency. She'd seen Zeus fall. She'd watched his body hit the floor, and whatever part of a Rottweiler's brain processes loss, whatever ancient pre-verbal mechanism turns grief into action, it fired all at once. She charged. Hera hit Tomas before he could turn around. She went for the gun arm, not the throat, not the chest, the arm. Her jaws clamped down on his right wrist with enough force to compress the bones, and Tomas screamed. The Glock fell. It clattered across the floor and disappeared under a console table that cost more than his car. He swung his left fist into the side of her head, hard. The impact rocked her skull sideways, but she didn't let go. She braced her legs, dug her nails into the concrete, and pulled. Tomas felt his wrist bend in a direction it wasn't designed to go. The sound it made was wet, personal, the kind of sound your own body shouldn't make. He screamed again, higher this time, the sound of a man whose professional composure was dissolving into animal panic. Mace was on his feet, bleeding from the concrete impact, his tactical vest torn where Zeus's teeth had grazed it. He scrambled for the SIG, found it, turned toward Hera. Get her off! A shadow moved, fast, low, from the adjacent room, the kitchen, through an open doorway that neither man had cleared because neither man had thought to clear a kitchen in a house where the security system was supposed to be dead. Ares, 142 pounds of chest and jaw moving at full sprint. He crossed the 10 feet between the kitchen doorway and Mace in less than a second and hit him from the side like a freight train with teeth. Mace went down again. The SIG fired, a wild shot that punched through a glass panel and sent fractures racing across the surface like lightning frozen in ice. Ares didn't go for the throat. He went for the legs. His jaws locked onto Mace's calf just above the boot, and he bit down. The tactical pants tore like tissue paper. The muscle beneath compressed. Mace felt the bones flex and thought, with a strange clarity that only extreme pain provides, that this was what it felt like to be caught in a machine. He punched the dog in the skull, once, twice, 3 times. His fist connected with the broad, flat cranium and bounced off like he was hitting a cinder block wrapped in fur. Ares didn't flinch, didn't blink. His eyes were fixed on some middle distance that existed between rage and purpose, and his jaw tightened with each blow, using the pain as fuel. You're probably thinking he should have aimed for the eyes, the nose, something soft. Yeah, easy to think that from wherever you're sitting right now. Try it with 142 pounds of muscle clamped to your leg while your blood pressure's dropping and your night vision goggles are fogging up from your own sweat. See how tactical you feel. Tomas had gotten free. Hera had released his wrist, not because he'd fought her off, but because she'd chosen to let go. She'd repositioned. She stood between Tomas and the west corridor door, blocking the exit exactly the way Zeus had before. Blood dripped from her muzzle, not hers. Tomas cradled his mangled wrist against his chest. The bones were grinding. He could feel them moving under the skin like broken pottery in a bag. His left hand found the backup knife on his belt, a 5-inch Ka-bar, serrated edge. He pulled it free. Hera didn't move. She watched him the way a chess player watches an opponent reach for a piece they both know is the wrong one. In the basement, the floor safe was still open. The drive sat where Mace had dropped it when Zeus hit him. Forgotten. $11 million of classified data lying on the floor, and not a single person in that house gave a damn about it anymore. Nobody cared about the drive anymore. Mace kicked. His boot connected with Ares' jaw, and for a half-second the dog's grip loosened. Mace twisted free, leaving a chunk of his calf muscle between the Rottweiler's teeth. I know how that sounds, but the medical report confirmed it. A 4-centimeter section of the gastrocnemius, removed cleanly, like a surgeon with no anesthesia. Mace scrambled backward, leaving a blood trail on the concrete. Ares swallowed, licked his lips, and started walking toward Mace again. Slow, deliberate, the way an animal moves when it knows the prey isn't going anywhere. Mace looked at his leg. The wound was deep. Arterial blood pulsed through his torn pants in rhythmic jets. Bright red, not dark, which meant the perineal artery was nicked. He pressed his hand against it and the blood ran through his fingers, hot and slick and wrong. Declan. His voice was wet, shaking. We need extraction. Now. Static. Declan! The earpiece crackled. I'm working on it. The west corridor is... The dogs are in the west corridor. They're everywhere. Zeus is down, but the others are... Ares lunged. Mace threw himself sideways. The dog's jaws snapped closed on the air where his throat had been, close enough that Mace felt the breeze of it, the displacement of air, the heat. He rolled, hit a wall, and found himself in the kitchen, a gleaming wasteland of brushed steel appliances, marble countertops, and a central island the size of a boat. He pulled himself around the island. Ares followed. The dog's nails clicked on the marble tile, a metronome counting down to something inevitable. Mace reached up to the counter. His hand found a knife block. He pulled the first handle he touched, a 10-inch chef's knife, Japanese steel, probably cost $800. His hand was slippery with blood. The handle almost slid free. He gripped tighter. Ares appeared around the island. Mace slashed. The blade caught the dog across the muzzle, a shallow cut that opened a red line from nose to cheek. Ares pulled back, shook his head. Blood sprayed across the white marble, dark red on white, a pattern that looked like modern art, the expensive kind. For a moment they stared at each other, man and dog, knife and teeth. The kitchen smelled like copper and adrenaline and the faint ghost of whatever Elias had cooked for dinner. Garlic, probably. Garlic and blood. That's what I think about when I remember this part. How wrong those smells were together. Then the glass door at the far end of the kitchen slid open. Not by itself, not electronically. A shape pushed through it. Small, dark, moving with a silence that made the other dogs sound clumsy. Athena. She'd been outside the whole time, not guarding, not patrolling, waiting. She'd circled the house while her siblings engaged the intruders, found the one exit they might use, and sealed it. Now she stood in the kitchen doorway, blocking the last way out. Her amber eyes caught the faint light from the cracked glass panels and held it. 2 small fires in a dark frame. She wasn't shaking anymore. Mace looked at the knife in his hand, at Ares in front of him, at Athena behind. The math didn't work. He dropped the knife. It clattered on the marble, raised his hands. Started to say something. Surrender, probably, or a negotiation. The kind of words humans use when they've run out of options and still believe that talking can save them. Ares didn't speak human. He hit Mace low, jaws around the ankle this time, pulling, dragging the man off his feet and across the marble floor toward the center of the kitchen. Mace screamed. His fingers clawed at the smooth stone, found nothing. Athena watched from the doorway. She didn't join in, didn't need to. Her role had never been force. It was containment. She was the door that closed behind you, the last thing you saw before the options ran out. In the corridor, Tomas was running. He'd gotten past Hera, Barely. The car bar had kept her at distance long enough for him to reach the staircase and sprint for the second floor. His wrist was useless. His hand hung at a wrong angle, swelling fast, the bones grinding with every step. He could feel them. Every step, he could feel them. He didn't know where he was going. Just up, away from the ground floor, away from the sounds coming out of the kitchen that he was trying very hard not to think about. He reached the second floor landing. The studio was ahead. The hallway branched left and right. He went left, toward the west side, toward the windows, toward anything that looked like an exit. A window, floor to ceiling. The valley beyond, dark and indifferent. He raised his boot and kicked. The glass held, tempered, reinforced, designed to withstand hurricane-force winds and the aesthetic standards of a man who charged $40 million per building. He kicked again. A spiderweb of cracks appeared. Again. The glass bowed outward but didn't break. His boot left a gray scuff mark on the surface. Such a small mark. Such a useless effort. Behind him, nails on concrete. He turned. Hera stood at the end of the hallway. She was panting, her sides heaving, blood and drool hanging from her jaw in long strings that swayed with each breath. But her eyes were steady, locked on him, patient. The patience of an animal that doesn't count time. Thomas pressed his back against the cracked window. He held the car bar in his left hand. His right hand hung useless. Easy. His voice was barely audible, cracking. Easy, girl. Hera took a step forward. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm leaving. See? I'm trying to leave. Another step. The distance between them shrank to 15 feet. 10. Tomas felt the cracked glass pressing against his back, felt the cold of the valley behind it, felt the absolute, crushing certainty that he was not going to talk his way out of this room. He tightened his grip on the knife. Hera charged. Elias heard the gunshots from the panic room. Muffled, distant, like someone clapping their hands underwater. He counted them. 3, 4. A pause. Then 2 more. Then something that wasn't a gunshot, but was worse. A scream that cut through the concrete walls and the steel door and landed in his chest like a fist. Then another sound. The one he'd been dreading. A yelp. Short. Cut off. Zeus. He pressed his forehead against the cold steel door. His hands were flat against it, palms down, fingers spread. The metal was so cold it burned. He could feel the vibrations of the house, impacts, movement, the deep bass of bodies hitting walls and floors. The door transmitted everything, every collision, every scream, every silence. The satellite phone was on the floor where he'd dropped it. The security firm had confirmed. 38 minutes. He was safe. He was behind 8 inches of reinforced concrete and a biometric lock that nothing in that house could breach. He was safe, and his dogs were dying. I don't know how to describe the next 15 minutes in a way that does them justice. I wasn't there. I'm reconstructing this from what Elias told the investigators later and what the security cameras recorded once Aegis came back online. But I know this. Elias Vance is a man who designs buildings that cost more than small countries. He has 3 patents, a TED Talk with 2 million views, and a handshake deal with a prime minister. And during those 15 minutes, he sat on the floor of a concrete box with his knees drawn up and his hands over his ears and cried like a child. It didn't help. The sounds came through anyway. Growls, crashes, a human voice screaming words he couldn't make out. Then slowly, the sounds got quieter, farther apart, like a thunderstorm passing over the ridge and moving down the valley. Then silence. Real silence. Not the digital silence of Aegis powering down. The silence that comes after violence. The silence that means it's over, or that everyone involved is too broken to make noise. Elias waited, counted to 60, counted again. His hand found the biometric scanner. His thumb pressed against it. It took 3 tries. His hands were shaking too badly. The sensor couldn't read the print. The lock clicked. He pushed the door open. The hallway was dark. He grabbed the flashlight from the panic room kit and clicked it on. The beam cut a white cone through the blackness. Dust motes floated in the light. The house smelled like gunpowder and blood and the sharp, acrid tang of cracked concrete. He moved down the stairs, slowly. The flashlight swept left and right. The walls were intact. The ceiling was intact. The house looked normal until he reached the ground floor. Glass everywhere. A panel in the west corridor had shattered. Bullet hole. Spiderweb fractures radiating outward. Pieces on the floor that crunched under his bare feet. He'd forgotten shoes. He was still barefoot. The glass bit into his soles and he barely felt it. The concrete floor was smeared with blood. Not spatters. Smears. Long, dragging streaks that told a story he could read but didn't want to. He followed them. The main corridor was wrecked. A console table overturned. A lamp shattered. Bloody paw prints and boot prints overlapping in patterns that mapped a fight he hadn't seen but could feel. The walls still held the energy of it, the way a room holds heat after a fire. He followed the corridor to the east and found Aries. The dog was standing in the kitchen doorway, not moving. Just standing, his massive frame blocking the entrance, his muzzle cut and bleeding, the gash across his nose crusted with drying blood. His chest heaved with each breath. His eyes found Elias and held him. Behind Aries, on the kitchen floor, a man lay motionless. Elias could see boots, a tactical vest, blood on the marble. He didn't go closer. Athena appeared beside Aries. She was clean, no blood, no wounds. She looked at Elias with those amber eyes, the same eyes that had watched him from a shelter crate in Westchester 3 years ago, waiting to see if this one would keep her, and sat down. Then she did something she'd never done before. She pressed her body against Elias's leg, not a lean, not a brush. She pushed herself against him and held there, her ribs expanding and contracting against his calf, her warmth soaking through his pajama pants. She was trembling, fine, rapid tremors that ran through her frame like current through a wire. Elias looked down at her. She looked up at him, and he understood something he'd missed for 3 years. Athena wasn't fearless. She'd never been fearless. She was terrified, had been terrified since the day a family in Yonkers decided she was too much trouble and dropped her at a shelter. She'd spent her whole life being terrified and doing the job anyway, standing in doorways, blocking exits, watching the shadows. Not because she wasn't scared, but because being scared and being brave aren't opposites. They're the same thing. His hand found the top of her head. She pressed into it, hard. "I know, girl, I know." He turned and walked toward the main corridor. Athena stayed at his heels. Close, closer than she'd ever walked before. He found them near the west door. Hera was lying on the concrete. Her breathing was steady, but her body was covered in shallow cuts, defensive wounds from a knife. Her right ear was torn, the cartilage folded at an angle that made her look lopsided, but she was alive. She lifted her head when Elias knelt beside her and her tail moved once against the floor. "Good girl." His voice cracked. "Good girl." He stood, looked down the corridor. Zeus was 10 feet away, lying on his side. The flashlight caught the blood first, a dark pool that had spread across the concrete in an almost perfect circle, the edges already thickening in the cold air. His shoulder was mangled. The entry wound was small, but the exit had opened a hole the size of a fist. His ribs rose and fell in a rhythm that was too slow, too shallow, too far apart. Elias ran. He dropped to his knees. The concrete was wet, warm. His hands found Zeus's head, that broad, heavy skull he'd held 1,000 times on the couch, in the yard, during thunderstorms, when the old dog pretended he wasn't scared. Hey, big guy, I'm here." Zeus's eye opened. Just one. The other was swollen shut from where his body had hit the floor. He looked at Elias. The iris was dark, almost black, but somewhere in there, somewhere behind the pain and the blood loss and the shutting down of systems that couldn't be rebooted, there was recognition, and his tail moved, once. A single, heavy thump against the bloody concrete. The sound it made was small, definite. "You did it," Elias whispered. "You stopped them. You hear me? You stopped them." Hera had dragged herself down the corridor. It must have hurt, the cuts on her legs, the torn ear, but she made it. She lay down next to Zeus, pressing her body against his, the way she'd pressed against him every night for 7 years on the living room floor. She licked his face, his ear, the wound on his shoulder that was still seeping. Athena stood behind Elias, silent, watching. Elias's hands were covered in blood. He could feel the dog's heartbeat under his palm, faint, irregular, skipping beats like a record player winding down. "Stay with me. The vet's coming. Someone's coming. Just stay with me." Zeus's breathing slowed. Elias pressed his forehead against the dog's neck. He could smell him, the familiar scent of warm fur and earth and something that was uniquely Zeus, something that had greeted him every morning for 7 years and would never greet him again. The smell of home, the smell of safe. "Please," Zeus exhaled, long, slow, the kind of breath that empties everything. He didn't inhale. Hera whined, a thin broken sound that rose and fell and rose again. She pushed her nose against Zeus's muzzle, pushed harder, waiting for the response that wasn't coming. Athena lay down, right there on the bloody concrete next to Zeus. She pressed her chin against his back leg, closed her eyes, and for the first time since Elias had known her, she stopped watching. She just lay there, with him. If you're listening to this in the dark, I'm sorry. If you're listening to this next to your dog, hold them. Right now. Don't wait. Elias sat back on his heels. His hands were shaking. His face was wet. The flashlight had rolled away, casting a sideways beam across the corridor that turned the blood black and the shadows into walls. He stayed there. For a long time, he stayed there. The first responders arrived 22 minutes later, the security team from Manhattan, followed by Putnam County Sheriff's deputies. They found Elias sitting on the corridor floor with Zeus's head in his lap, Hera pressed against his side, and Ares and Athena standing guard at opposite ends of the hallway. Nobody moved them. The deputies cleared the house. They found Mace in the kitchen, unconscious from blood loss, his leg shredded below the knee. Tomas was on the second floor, curled in a fetal position beneath a shattered window, his right wrist destroyed and his left arm open from elbow to shoulder where Hera's teeth had caught him during the charge. The kabar was still in his hand. It hadn't helped. Declan Reese was arrested 40 minutes later in the Sprinter van. He hadn't run. He was still sitting at his laptop, staring at a screen that showed nothing. When the deputies opened the van door, he looked at them and said one thing. The dogs weren't supposed to stay. No, they weren't supposed to, but they did. Because you can hack a system. You can kill the lights, the cameras, the locks, the alarms. You can shut down every piece of technology in a building and leave it blind and deaf and dumb. But you can't hack loyalty. You can't shut down a heartbeat. And you can't write code that overrides 2,000 years of breeding that says, this is my family and you're not getting through. The titanium drive was recovered from the basement, undamaged. Elias didn't care. The funeral, because that's what it was, even if no one called it that, happened 3 days later. A bronze casket, custom made by a metalworker in Cold Spring who normally built sculptures for Manhattan galleries. Elias had called him at 6 in the morning and offered him whatever it cost. The metalworker didn't charge him. They buried Zeus on the east ridge of the property, overlooking the Hudson, the spot where the old dog used to sit in the mornings, watching the valley fill with light. Elias dug the hole himself, by hand. A shovel and 4 hours of work that left blisters on his palms and dirt under his nails, and an ache in his lower back that he welcomed, because it meant he was still feeling something. Hera, Ares, and Athena stood at the edge of the grave, while Elias lowered the casket. Hera sniffed it once. Ares turned and walked away, not far, just to the tree line, where he sat with his back to the group and stared into the forest. I don't know what that was. Grief, anger, something dogs carry that we don't have a word for. Athena stayed. She lay down next to the open grave, her chin on her paws, and didn't move for 2 hours. When Elias started filling the hole, she watched each shovel of dirt fall and didn't flinch. She stayed until the ground was level and the stone was placed. Then she stood up, walked to the edge of the ridge, and looked at the valley. She sat there for a long time, alone. Elias didn't say anything. No eulogy, no speech. He just smoothed the dirt and placed a flat river stone on top. He'd have the bronze marker made later. A sculptor in Brooklyn was already working on it, full size. Zeus in his patrol stance, head low, eyes forward. But for now, the stone was enough. 2 weeks later, the house was repaired. New glass panels, new locks. Mechanical this time, no software, no network connection. Deadbolts made of case-hardened steel that required a physical key Elias kept on a chain around his neck. Aegis was rebuilt from scratch. New architecture, new firewalls, and one new protocol that Declan Reese, sitting in a federal detention center in White Plains, would have found deeply ironic. Priority override, canine monitoring. Every camera, every sensor, every microphone in the system was now calibrated to track the dogs first. Their location, their heart rate, their movement patterns. If Hera stopped in a doorway for more than 10 seconds, Aegis flagged it. If Ares' heart rate spiked, the system went to alert. If Athena disappeared from all sensors for more than 2 minutes, which she did regularly because some things can't be tracked, a backup thermal array activated to find her. The technology served the dogs now, not the other way around. Ares had changed. Everyone could see it. He'd always been the loudest, the most physical, the one who bumped into glass doors and knocked over furniture with his tail. Now he was quiet. He'd taken Zeus's position in the main corridor. The same spot, the same posture, head on paws, eyes tracking. He did the morning patrol, the evening sweep, the midnight check. He never walked into the glass door again. Hera's ear healed crooked. The torn cartilage folded inward, giving her a lopsided look that made her seem like she was permanently listening to something only she could hear. She still positioned herself in doorways, still watched 2 rooms at once, but there was a new quality to her stillness, a weight that hadn't been there before, the weight of knowing what the doorways are for. Athena remained Athena, invisible, present, the ghost in the system that no algorithm could track and no intruder would see until it was too late. But now, at night, she slept next to Elias's bed, not on it, next to it, close enough that he could reach down and feel her breathing. She'd never done that before. A Thursday evening, late September. The valley was turning gold and copper, and the air smelled like wood smoke and dying leaves, and the cold promise of a winter that hadn't arrived yet, but was already packing its bags. Elias sat on the east terrace with a bourbon he wasn't drinking. Hera was at his feet. Ares was on the ridge, silhouetted against the sunset, standing on the flat stone that marked Zeus's grave. Athena was somewhere, always somewhere. Elias's phone buzzed. A notification from Aegis. System nominal. All sectors clear. Canine status, green. He looked at it. Then he picked up the phone, held the power button, and watched the screen go dark. He set it on the table, face down. Hera lifted her head and looked at him. "I know," he said. "Took me long enough." He leaned back in the chair. The bourbon caught the last of the light and turned amber, the same color as Athena's eyes, the same color as the valley at this hour, the same color as everything worth keeping. On the ridge, Ares turned, looked at the house, looked at Elias. Then he turned back to the valley and sat down next to his brother's grave, ears forward, watching the tree line the way Zeus used to watch it, the way he'd watch it every night from now on. Elias closed his eyes. The house hummed around him, quiet, alive, listening. But the real security system wasn't in the walls or the wires or the code. It was breathing at his feet, standing on the ridge, hiding in the shadows. 4 Rottweilers, now 3. And 3 was enough. "If you made it this far, I need you to do something. Look at the dog next to you, on the couch, on the floor, at the foot of your bed. That animal would step between you and a bullet, a blade, a shadow in the dark, and never think twice. Hit subscribe. I tell stories like this every week. And drop a comment. What's your dog's name? Because every dog deserves to have its name said out loud." The lights stayed on that night. All of them. Every room, every corridor, every window blazing into the dark valley like a signal fire. But it wasn't the lights that kept the shadows out. It was the sound of 3 dogs breathing in the dark, and the memory of one who gave everything so the others could keep watch. The strongest lock ever built doesn't run on electricity. It runs on a heartbeat.